the barrage of up to 5,000 rockets, according to Israel. Now we're rolling. But even more dangerous and unprecedented, an invasion, folks, an invasion of southern Israel by Hamas terrorists, and what appears to be a massive intelligence failure on the part of Israel. Not to mention, on the 50-year anniversary, almost to the day, of the launch of another surprise attack against Israel, the Yom Kippur War, October 6, 1973. Well, October 7th, 2023 is a date that will live in infamy for Israel, a modern day Yom Kippur 2.0, I guess you could call it in some ways, with Hamas terrorists, with the rockets, which we expect, but an on-the-ground infiltration, folks. At last count, Israel, and I'm coming to you around 2:30 p.m. Eastern time here in the United States, at last count, Israel had said they were fighting battles in some 22 towns in southern Israel, in places like Sderot, where I've spent a lot of time over the years. I have dear friends there right now. I have dear friends in Israel being called up to the reserves and sent to the south to battle against Hamas. But folks, house to house, street to street fighting, nightmare scenario. Hamas terrorists on the ground in Israel, in Israeli towns and villages along the Gaza border. Not only have they slaughtered Israeli civilians in places like Sderot, and also reportedly killed some Israeli soldiers, even IDF senior officers killed in this Hamas surprise attack, but also Hamas taking Israeli civilians, including the elderly, men, women, children, hostage, dragging them back over the border into Gaza. So, folks, a nightmare scenario on every level. I mentioned a massive intelligence failure. I think the big question here is, how exactly did this happen? Obviously, Israel is always on war footing, you would presume. And look, I've been with the IDF on IDF drills, so Israel certainly is on war footing constantly. But folks, how does this happen? Of course, look, it happens during Shabbat, where Israelis, let's face it, have their guard down. They're with family to an extent. Happens at the end of the high holiday season, the day after the close of Sukkot, the Feast of Tabernacles. So certainly Hamas factored all of this in. So that's certainly a factor here. But also you have the internal division inside Israel, these massive demonstrations over almost a year now, the past 9 months or so, certainly a factor here as well, where Hamas and Iran and Hezbollah have smelled weakness. They've seen a divided Israel, and they've seen Israel as kind of ripe for the pickings. I don't know, folks, that we would have seen this if not for the political tumult in Israel right now and the division on the streets and these massive demonstrations. I'm not blaming the demonstrators. That's not what I'm saying. What I am saying is Israel says, no, hey, we're ready. But to Israel's enemies, it gave off an impression of division and weakness that they have chosen this time to capitalize on in their view. So we have at least 100 Israelis dead, some 900 more injured. That is the state of play right now at around 2:30 p.m. Eastern time. Someone said, vengeance is mine, saith the Lord. I'm looking at our comments. I thought of the verse, let God arise and may his enemies be scattered as well. But now the IDF, what is the plan striking back? And I apologize throwing all this stuff at you folks. It's kind of like a fire hose right now. There's so much information coming by the minute. But here is the situation right now. Israel is reacting. Israel carrying out airstrikes against Hamas military targets in Gaza. But as I come to you, we have also Israelis on the ground still, hand-to-hand, house-to-house firefights with Hamas terrorists in Israeli towns and villages along the Gaza border. As I said, some 22 Israeli towns were beset by Hamas terrorists, and there were firefights going on. We've got footage of Israeli civilians, and I'm just coming to you live, kind of down and dirty here again on my phone. I don't have the usual Watchman studio or editors today, but we had to come to you with a breaking news update on what's going on in Israel right now. But there are images right now of Hamas on motorcycles, even Hamas using paragliders from the sea to cross the border into southern Israel. So by land, air, and sea, Hamas is attacking Israel right now. There is footage of Israeli civilians being led back over into Gaza, into the bowels of hell, in golf carts and on motorcycles led by Hamas terrorists, including the elderly Israeli civilians. At last count, maybe 52 civilians taken back into Gaza. There's footage of all of this. There's also footage of Hamas breaching that very large and what seemed to be a very effective border fence along Gaza that Israel took a few years to build and erect. And folks, look, I've been on that border, and I have seen that many times, and I've seen that fence. I saw it when it was being built, and it seemed very effective. It seemed like an incredible deterrent, and yet Hamas was able to breach that border fence. Now, some of the speculation I've heard on the ground, because we keep asking, how exactly did this happen? Israel's intelligence services are obviously incredible and have averted many attempts by Hamas to cross into southern Israel over the years, have uncovered terror tunnels along the Gaza border, have uncovered terror tunnels along the Lebanon border many times over the years. So Israel's intel has been phenomenal. And yet in this case, folks, this looks like a massive intel failure. And some of the speculation has been that, and we reported on this on the newscast over the past few weeks, we've seen an uptick in this rioting along the Gaza border by Hamas and by Palestinians. Some have said that perhaps Hamas used those riots as cover to plant explosives along the fence and to work on weakening that border fence and that barrier. And then what we have here, the massive incursion. So that is a possibility, but there will be recriminations here, and Israelis will be talking about this for years to come. How exactly did this happen? But that's still, with the Yom Kippur War nearly 50 years ago to the day, the launch of that surprise attack, as I mentioned, still 50 years later, Israelis are debating how it happened and still angry about it. Well, right now, that conversation can be had at another day. Right now, I think the focus for Israel is what comes next and how do we react. That's the focus right now. Again, this happens during Shabbat, during the end of a holiday season. Sukkot just ended yesterday. Israelis with their guard down, surely, in many cases, clearly here. Now Israel is rushing forces and reservists to the south to engage. Hamas terrorists are still in these Israeli communities on Israeli soil, engaging firefights. Again, as I come to you around 2:35 p.m. Eastern time here in the United States, it's still happening, folks. Rockets are still being launched. We're in the midst of it. This is only the beginning, because Israel right now, I mentioned at the top, people are calling this in Israel's 9/11. That's the extent of it. Now, the civilian count, or the casualty count, thank God, is not as high as we saw that horrific day on 9/11, that terrorist atrocity. But still, for Israel, a tiny country, 100 people killed in less than 24 hours, 900 wounded in less than 24 hours. Those are massive numbers for Israel, especially concentrated as they are in the south, in the southern end of the country right now. So big picture you have right there, big questions. Okay, what do we have? How does Israel respond? Number one, the airstrikes are being carried out right now against military targets, Hamas military targets in Gaza. We expect a massive aerial assault on Hamas targets in Gaza. By the way, Palestinian Islamic Jihad is also involved here. They have thrown their hats in the ring as well, and they are aligning with their fellow Iranian proxy, Hamas, in this invasion of Israel, this all-out surprise assault on Israel. Again, unprecedented, folks. Key word there, unprecedented. This is the worst attack on Israel, in my view, since the Yom Kippur War in 50 years. Because this is literally a mini invasion of Israel from the south, not per se with tanks and that kind of assault. But look, Hamas foot soldiers, motorcycles, pickup trucks, paragliders, breaching the fence and entering communities in southern Israel. And by the way, apparently seizing at least an Israeli Humvee, an Israeli tank, and some other Israeli vehicles, and taking them back over the border in Gaza as well. Now some of our commenters are saying 250 killed and 1,700 injured. Our viewer Perry Dean just commented, these numbers will rise, folks. We'll see hundreds in the end. I'm sad to say, killed. Hundreds of Israelis killed, thousands possibly injured, not only with the on-the-ground incursions, but the rocket barrages. Again, how does Israel respond? You have to consider now. And does this complicate Israel's response? We know about airstrikes. Clearly, I'm not a military strategist, but it seems pretty common sense after Israel's been dealing with this threat out of Gaza for, I don't know, close to 2 decades now, and this is the worst yet. It clearly seems that Israel needs to conduct a major ground invasion of Gaza to eliminate Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad once and for all, to eliminate them once and for all as a threat. Put a stop to it now, never again after this. Never again. This has to be it. Now, many people have said over the years that Israel should do this. And then there's another chorus of voices that says, but what happens after Hamas is gone? Better to have the devil you do know than the devil you don't know. And many people have said that over the years. But folks, in this case, to say a red line has been crossed here is a massive understatement. And Israel must, it can't just be airstrikes. Israel must now, you would think, mount a pretty major ground invasion to eliminate Hamas once and for all and to target Hamas leaders. I think you'll also see that as well. I don't know that Hamas is ready for what it unleashed here or what it's about, the response that it unleashed and how Israel's ready to react. Israel surprised, caught on its heels, no doubt. Early lumps here, no doubt, just as in the Yom Kippur War 50 years ago when Syria and Egypt made great gains. But once Israel gets its legs underneath it, so to speak, and the IDF and the political military establishment, and they're discussing this and they're plotting things out, you have to think there's going to be an unprecedented response from Israel. Yes, unprecedented in terms of this attack and what Hamas has accomplished, but Israel will have an unprecedented response here, I believe. And that means 2 things. Number 1, Hamas may not be long for this world, Hamas and Gaza. Number 2, the world will howl and gnash its teeth and call on Israel on both sides to de-escalate and call on Israel to restrain itself, no doubt. But the ultimate complicating factor here, folks, is there are Israeli hostages right now in Gaza, dozens, perhaps as many as 52. Not only Israeli soldiers, and as I mentioned at the top, we've had senior IDF officers apparently killed by Hamas in this mini invasion. But Israeli civilians, we're talking men, women, children seen. Photos, video of children being carted off, Israeli children, by Hamas terrorists and the elderly over the border back into Gaza. Does that complicate Israel's response? For Hamas, they see this as a major coup. They're saying, look, we have these Israeli hostages, prisoners of war. And by the way, Benjamin Netanyahu declared war. He said, this is war. It's not just an incursion. It's not just an operation. It's a war. But does this complicate Israel's efforts to conduct this war? Now that 52, at least, according to various reports out of the region, Israeli civilians are hostage of Hamas, hostage to the devil in Gaza right now, to wicked, evil, Iranian-backed Hamas terrorists. How does Israel navigate that? That's going to be something to watch, folks. Again, we're at the beginning of this. I'm not sure, again, that Hamas knows what it unleashed here. Perhaps Hamas just thought, we'll catch them unaware, we'll carry out some attacks, we'll take hostages. Hamas's main goal here may have just been to take hostages and use that as leverage so that Israel would then release Hamas prisoners from Israeli jails and have a hostage swap, which never really works very well in Israel's favor, needless to say. Also a propaganda coup for Hamas and for the Iranian regime, which is really calling the shots here, folks. Let's be honest. Let's be serious. Hamas didn't just conceive this plan out of thin air. Certainly coordinated with Hezbollah, certainly coordinated with their masters in Tehran. No doubt. This was not a solo Hamas operation. We've been telling you frequently here on the newscast over the past few months that a multi-front war is coming. Will this remain? And that's the other question here. Question number 1, how does Israel respond? Ground invasion. And how does Israel get around the hostage situation in its response? Does Hamas murder these Israelis who are in Hamas hands when Israel responds? Point number 2, does this become a multi-front war? What does Hezbollah do? Folks, I believe that is the key question right now. What does Hezbollah do? We've been talking many times here in the newscast about this ring of fire. that surrounds Israel on all sides, whether it's Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad to the south, Hezbollah to the north, further south, the Houthis in Yemen, those various Shia militias in Iraq and Syria. And what about question number 3? So does that ring of fire ignite? Does Hezbollah hold its fire for another day? Or does Hezbollah see an opening to get involved here as well? Remember, Hamas is willing, or Iran is always willing to fight to the last drop of Arab blood. Remember, the Iranian regime, Iran's leaders are Persians. They are not Arabs, and they use Arab proxies like the Houthis, like Hamas, to do their bidding, and they see them as expendable. The Iranian regime really has no regard for human life, nor does Hamas. So they will send young men, brainwashed young men, with a wicked ideology and agenda to die. So Iran has no compunction about doing that. They'll send endless waves of Hamas, but Iran is holding Hezbollah, or has been holding Hezbollah in reserve for some time now. And the Iranian regime might be saying, not yet. Iran may step back and say, look, Hamas already has accomplished, this is a massive accomplishment for Hamas, folks. Shocking. There's no way around it. This can't be downplayed. It can't be overstated. Just the propaganda, the vulnerability now. Israel was already seen by its enemies as increasingly vulnerable because of the internal divisions. And now this? Look, many times on the newscast, I've laid out a scenario, again, to the north, not to the south, to the north, of Hezbollah infiltrating northern Israel, planting that green and yellow Hezbollah flag, beaming the images around the world, and using that as a massive propaganda victory. Well, now we have Hamas doing it. Hamas is likely, I'm sure, in some of those villages, planted Palestinian or Hamas, green Hamas flags, and captured that footage. The footage is there. We have Israelis now being paraded in Gaza, Israeli citizens, prisoners in Gaza, and not just soldiers, which is bad enough, but civilians. But another question here. We're laying out some questions where it goes now. I've given you the state of play. It's a disaster. But Israel can and will, I believe, recoup, and this could mean the end of Hamas. And let me tell you, folks, if it doesn't, I'm going to be very, very frank. If this does not result in Hamas crushed and a ground invasion, and this Hamas threat crushed once and for all, then the government of Benjamin Netanyahu will be in serious trouble. He will look weak. Have a wise response, no doubt. But it has to be a crushing, decisive. Key word there, folks. This has to be a decisive victory for Israel over Hamas, in my view, or the people of Israel will lose confidence in the current Israeli leadership. Benjamin Netanyahu has been known for being strong on national security. There has never been a moment more than now, more than today, October 7th, 2023, where he needs to show, this is why I'm in office for such a time as this. This is why God Almighty has essentially paved the way for me to be in office once again after being voted out. He's back in. I interviewed him back in December, all about this, the security threats. This is it. Bibi is seen as Mr. Security in Israel. This has to be, folks, again, if you're calling this Israel's 9/11, there's no turning back, right? That's why I'm saying, does Hamas know what it just unleashed? Because Israel, the attack was unprecedented. Israel's response must be unprecedented against Hamas. It can't just be a week-long operation, airstrikes, only for this to flare up again a few months later for more Hamas rockets. That can't be the way this time. Another question here. We're talking about Gaza. What about Jerusalem? What about Judea and Samaria? Someone asked that question. I'm getting some questions that are being texted to me. What about Jerusalem? Great question. Hamas leader, military commander Mohammed Daif, who is perhaps the most wanted man among Israel's military and intel services. They've been targeting him for years. Again, he's Hamas's military commander who helped plan this whole assault on Israel, this invasion of Israel, again, unprecedented. He said, look, it's an all-out assault. He's calling on terrorists in Jerusalem and Judea and Samaria, which the world calls the West Bank. Here in the newscast, we call it Judea and Samaria because that's what the Bible calls it. And if the Bible calls it that, it's good enough for us. But what will happen in Judea and Samaria? What will happen in Jerusalem? We've seen obviously a terror wave that we've been covering very closely here in the newscast over the past several months, an uptick in attacks in Jerusalem, in Judea and Samaria, the biblical heartland. Is that going to ignite and flare up? I talked about that ring of fire, Lebanon, Gaza, etc. Iran has been funneling weapons into Judea and Samaria, the West Bank, and into eastern Jerusalem to open another front there. Is that going to flare up? Hamas, and in particular Islamic Jihad, have a very strong presence in places like Jenin and Nablus. Are they going to flare up? Is that the other shoe to drop? Is this all Hamas has, basically, is what I'm saying? And it's bad enough, but is there another shoe to drop? Was this just a plan of rocket bombardments, make an incursion over the border, drag hostages back to Gaza, and see what happens next, and leverage those hostages to get Hamas prisoners freed from Israeli jails? Or is this a more comprehensive plan? Is there another shoe to drop, God forbid? Does Hamas have a second stage to this? Or is Hamas, now that the first stage is over, they're saying they may be surprised, folks, even think about this, at the rate of their success. Did Hamas even expect to get this far? Is a good question. Did Hamas expect to have this smashing success? And it grieves me to even say that, but it's a successful operation for Hamas, no doubt. Did Hamas expect this level of success? Look, we have reports that Hamas fighters are still on the ground in Israel 16 hours after the initial incursions. Did Hamas expect this level of success? Or was it a situation where Hamas said, hey, we're not meeting a lot of resistance here. The IDF's not around. They're home for Shabbat, Sukkot, whatever. And Hamas is saying, well, we're here. There's not a lot of resistance. Let's push the envelope. And while we're at it, let's call for reinforcements. We have reports of more Hamas fighters coming through those breaches in the security fence. And we have Israelis in safe rooms. Still, at last count, 16 hours later. Look, folks, I have a personal stake in this. Not only do I love the land of Israel, I consider Jerusalem my second home. I'm there 4 times a year. You all know that. You watch the Watchman on a regular basis. But southern Israel is a place that's near and dear to my heart. Southern Israel, from Ashkelon, Ashdod, Sderot, Narim, all the great kibbutzes around southern Israel along the Gaza border, which are being bombarded and taking the brunt of this right now. I've spent a lot of time on the ground there staring into Gaza, quite literally. And I love those communities. I love the brave and resilient people of southern Israel. And these are beautiful communities. A stone's throw from the Mediterranean, great climate. It's the perfect place to live. Let me tell you, folks, except for the specter of Hamas a few hundred yards away on the other side of the Gaza border. And that specter became all too real and all too immediate today for the people of Israel. Keep sending your comments. What do you think? What would you do? I know we have some armchair generals here, I guess, but in all seriousness, I believe in speaking to real generals on a regular basis in Israel, current and former, speaking to Israeli officials on a regular basis, current and former, Israeli military analysts, current and former. I believe that this must be a decisive response from Israel. I mean decisive. This can never, ever happen again, folks. Something of this magnitude. Never again. Not only that, the Hamas rocket barrages, it's intolerable. It's not sustainable. Honestly, it should have been dealt with years ago. And now it will be dealt with. It's just very, very unfortunate that this is the trigger for Israel finally taking decisive action against this Hamas, Iran-backed Hamas and Islamic Jihad threat. Someone wrote, cutting the grass isn't working for Israel. One of our commenters wrote, cutting the grass is a term, actually, that Israeli military types use. We went in, we mowed the lawn. And now we're back out. We're going to have to go in and mow the lawn again and take out the threat, weaken Hamas. They rearm, we go back in, we mow the lawn again. That's terminology they use, and someone commented. Let's see some more comments here as we're going. We have many people commenting, thousands with us right now. Thank you for joining. Hey, if it's your first time joining us, folks, be sure to subscribe and click the notification bell so you get alerts every time a new video is posted here on the Watchman News channel. We just passed 700,000 subscribers. Hard to believe for such a time as this. and we're bringing you breaking information on everything going on. Apologies, I'm looking down here. Just reading comments. We've got people all over the world. We have some pro-Hamas types on here too. Let's see what else we have. Is this prophetic? I believe yes. Folks, I'm not saying this particular battle is a prophetic. It's not talked about, perhaps, this particular battle in the Bible, but certainly a precursor to coming biblical battles. I think without a doubt, Ezekiel 38 and 39, the book of Ezekiel chapters 38 and 39, certainly with Russia and Iran and Turkey involved, certainly coming down the pike. Many have thrown out Psalm 83 here. What do you think? And Isaiah 17, what do you all think? Is Psalm 83 a future war yet to come? There's many varying opinions on that. Isaiah 17, the destruction of Damascus. Damascus will become, not my words, the words of the prophet Isaiah. Damascus, he says, will become a ruinous heap and will cease to be a city. Listen, folks, Damascus has never been completely destroyed, even by the Mongols. It's one of the oldest inhabited cities in the world, yet the Bible says that a day is coming when that will happen. I know it may shock some people to hear that, but the Bible's very clear about that. So is this war? And folks, we're at the beginning stages. I'll be honest, I have no idea where this is going. Who knows where that's going? Again, an unprecedented attack requires, I believe, an unprecedented response from Israel. What will that look like? Does the hostage situation complicate things? Does Hezbollah get involved? What happens in Jerusalem? So I don't think anyone right now knows where this is going, folks. And if they do, if they say they've got a crystal ball, so to speak, and they know where it's going, then they're not being truthful with you. We can speculate about, hey, Israel will likely, based on the past, will likely act like this. But here's the deal, that tricky word again, unprecedented. There is no precedent for this. There's no precedent for it, other than the Yom Kippur War, which was different in that it was armies mobilizing. This was an all-out terrorist assault that saw civilians kidnapped in southern Israel. Israel will never be the same after this. That's not an understatement. Just like the United States was never the same after 9/11, Israel will never be the same after this. What does that look like? I don't know. But I can tell you, things are going to be different now in Israel. I hope for the better, ultimately, when the dust settles from this madness, this wicked evil that Hamas is inflicting, and Israel reacts decisively. But this is a game changer. And folks, let me tell you, the Iranian regime and Hezbollah right now are cheering this operation by Hamas. They're helping to pull the strings behind it. Look, folks, every time there is a new assault against Israel, there is a war room, quite literally a war room, where there is correspondence and communication between Hamas, between Hezbollah, between the Iranian regime. They're all communicating. The Houthis in Yemen, perhaps, are even phoning in, and they're communicating, sometimes in person. You could have a war room in Beirut with officials from Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard's Quds Force in the room, in the bunker, with Hezbollah leaders coordinating and on the horn with Hamas in Gaza. That's certainly what happened in May 2021. It's certainly what happened with some of these Palestinian Islamic Jihad flare-ups over the past year or so. So rest assured, there is a war room right now where Iran and Hezbollah are communicating with Hamas, and they are plotting their next move. Right now, they're saying, look, this is a smashing success that went even above and beyond what we expected to accomplish. That's probably what they're saying right now. And they're saying one of two things. Either let's press the envelope even more and inflict more wounds on the Zionist entity, as they would call Israel, or they're saying, let's call it a day, let's pack up and go back. Mission accomplished. Above and beyond everything we even hoped to do. Massive number of casualties by Israeli standards, surely. Hostages, civilians, a propaganda victory, Hamas looking strong in the eyes of the world, Israel looking unprepared and caught off guard, massive intelligence failure to the eyes of the world, looking vulnerable to its enemies. Look, the Yom Kippur War did the same thing. Israel had this massive, resounding, God-ordained victory in the Six-Day War. It was a miracle of God, the Six-Day War, no doubt. And then came the Yom Kippur War, Israel unprepared. And all of a sudden, Israel's enemies said, you know what? Israel's not invincible. And right now, you have to think Israel's enemies are saying the same thing. Israel, by far, the strongest fighting force in the Middle East, by far. According to a recent piece in U.S. News and World Report, Israel possesses the fourth strongest military in the world, fourth most powerful military in the world. Talk about amazing, folks. In only 75 years of existence, the modern rebirth, the miraculous modern rebirth of Israel, in 75 years, this tiny nation the size of the state of New Jersey has built up the fourth most powerful military in the world. It's pretty amazing. And that military right now is meeting, and they're planning, and they're saying, okay, how do we respond? Hamas landed the first blow. It has been a heavy, unprecedented blow. Israel right now will have to have an unprecedented response, no doubt. And what that looks like, I don't know. Again, what comes next, I don't know. We are in uncharted waters, folks. Does Hamas back off? Again, does it take its what they see as a victory, a temporary victory for them, and go home? Or do they push the envelope and continue to push? And then perhaps Hezbollah says, you know what? It's a good time for us to get involved. Because look, Iran, again, has been holding Hezbollah in reserve for years. The last major conflict reminiscent of something like we have right now was the Israel-Hezbollah war in 2006, which I believe some 130, 150 Israelis were killed during that war, which lasted over 30 days during the summer of 2006. Hezbollah has massively multiplied and expanded its arsenal since then in the ensuing 17 years. But Iran has very patiently held Hezbollah in reserve, waiting for the day when they will finally unleash their most lethal proxy, Hezbollah. Is now the time? Is this the moment with Israel so distracted in the south that Hezbollah launches from the north? Launches essentially what Hamas just did from air and from land. And by the way, by sea, Hamas as well, with literally paragliders crossing into Israel. This is where we're at. I mean, and I don't mean to pile on Israeli intelligence, who've done amazing work over the years, no doubt, again and again, in the Mossad. No, I mean, that's indisputable, that Israeli intel is incredible. But you have to say this is a massive failure. And it's interesting because we talked about in the newscast over the past week, Yom Kippur, and folks were asking, look, will Yom Kippur be a time, and this is the 50-year anniversary, the Jubilee of the Yom Kippur War. Would this be a time where Hamas strikes once again? And when Yom Kippur, the day of Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement passed, I said, well, it looks like no, thank God. But they waited until the very end of the high holiday season. This is the day after the end of Sukkot, the Feast of Tabernacles. And by the way, a good amount of my Christian friends from the United States and around the world are in Israel right now as well. So pray for them, folks. That's something, look, pray for the peace of Jerusalem right now. Pray for Israel, for southern Israel. Let God arise, let his enemies be scattered. And some folks are gloating here on the comments right now, pro-Hamas slogans and Palestinian flags. Fasten your seatbelts, boys and girls who are doing some gloating right now. We shall see. And the God of Israel sees this, as horrible as it is, and he laughs. He laughs at Israel's enemies, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And folks, he's still on the throne. He is still on the throne. He is in control. So continue to pray for Israel right now. Pray for the people of Israel. Pray for any Christians who were there, anyone who's there, but the Christian pilgrims who went there for the Feast of Tabernacles. I request that because I know many of them who were there, so I'd love your prayers for my friends there and my friends in Israel in general. Again, Israel's my second home. I'm in Jerusalem several weeks a year, and this is a time of great peril. And it's only getting started, folks. This is only beginning. This is just day one. This could be a sustained, not just an operation. And Netanyahu said that. It's not just an operation. This is a war. Finally, he has declared war against Hamas. I don't know that he's ever used those words and said, we are at war with Hamas over the years. And this is going back to late 2008, early 2009, about 15 years now. every year, every few months even, Israeli operations against Hamas and against Islamic Jihad in Gaza as well. And it's always been an operation. Never, to my knowledge, has an Israeli prime minister said, we are in a full-blown war with Hamas. I may be wrong, but Bibi was very clear and unequivocal today in saying this is a war. It's not an operation. It's not a limited one-week thing where the UN and the US and the EU pressure us for a ceasefire and we come to the table. I don't think this is that kind of engagement. We'll just say that. And I'm not quite sure that Hamas knows what it got itself into here. But I don't think Israel is this time going to say, you know what, okay, some airstrikes, we'll take out some tunnels, some targets, and then cease fire. Folks, this is, again, people are calling this Israel's 9/11. This is an absolute game changer. Israel will never be the same after this. We'll never do business, and that's probably not the word to use, but we'll conduct its affairs, let's say that, differently from here on out when it comes to security and militarily. No doubt. This will be just discussed for years and debated for years and years to come. But that's in years to come. We're focusing on the here and now. How it happened. How it happened will be discussed, but it happened and it's happening. And now Israel has to deal with it. Unfortunately, Israel has had to react, but now I believe Israel will go on the offensive and be proactive as they respond to this, and not sure where it's going. We're about to find out. Again, we are in uncharted waters, no doubt, folks. And the Iranian regime gloating about this, Hezbollah gloating, will they get involved? Hamas gloating, we have the hostages. There's a lot going on. Be prepared for coverage here on the Watchman News channel for days, I'm guessing weeks to come, however long this lasts. And again, if this is not an unprecedented response from the Israeli government, then I think this Israeli government will be in trouble. Because I think Israelis right now of all political stripes are going to say, hey, we need to respond. This needs to end. No more. This cannot stand, and this can never happen again. And Hamas must be just eliminated as a constant thorn in Israel's side. So we shall see if that is the way it should go. I will plan. I'm traveling tomorrow. I've got a lot going on this weekend. Traveling tomorrow. I will plan to come to you again tomorrow, most likely with a live stream. And then Monday through Friday, of course, throughout the week, we will have updates here, I am sure, every day here on the Watchman Newscast. Now, the world will howl eventually, because Israel's going to hit them hard, folks. And the world's going to howl and look for the calls for restraint and for all sides to de-escalate. It's coming. It's coming as Israeli civilians are dragged into Gaza. It's coming. But Israel needs to be resolute and to stand strong. Israel is a sovereign nation that needs to do what it needs to do to defend itself, regardless of what the world thinks. Israel needs to do, and Israel's leaders need to do what they believe is best for their nation. I pray that they do it, folks. Pray for Israel's leaders, its military, its people right now as we head into uncharted waters. Israel at war in the wake of this surprise attack by Hamas. Again, keep it all in prayer. I will see you tomorrow right here on The Watchman. God bless, and remember, never hold your peace. We'll see you again soon.